All right, good morning. I am Heather Westerfield, Chair of the Commission on School Accreditation. This regularly scheduled meeting of the Commission on School Accreditation is being held today, Thursday, October 3rd, 2019, at 10 a.m. in the 4th floor boardroom, Central High School Building, 359 Northwest Street, Jackson, Mississippi, in accordance with Mississippi Code annotated 25415. An audio recording is being made of this meeting, and minutes of this meeting will be recorded, and this meeting is also being live streamed. As I call the name of the commission members, please state the location of your presence for this meeting. Kelly Barfield.
Present, 4th floor boardroom.
John Brewer. Sarah Foster.
Present, 4th floor boardroom.
Roy Gill.
Present, boardroom.
Brian Harvey. Michael Lindsay.
Present, boardroom.
Dr. Valencia Martin. John Mistelis.
Present, boardroom.
Anthony Montgomery. Eddie Prather. Brad Stevens. May be joining in. Okay. Ingrid Williams. And Heather Westerfield, boardroom. A quorum of the commission is present for the purpose of conducting this meeting. This meeting is called to order at 10:05 a.m. At this time, I'll ask Sarah Foster to lead us in the invocation.
Pray with me. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much for this day and for this opportunity to be here. I thank you for each member of this commission. I thank you for each school district that's represented here. And Father, I just pray that you will be with us during this meeting, that we will use wisdom, and that we will make the best decisions for our educational system in Mississippi. Again, thank you for all of your many blessings. In your name I pray, amen.
Foster. All right, item 2, commission members, you've received a copy of the agenda. At this time, I'll entertain a motion for approval to adopt the agenda. Please identify yourself for the record. Motion by Mr. Brewer. Do we have a second?
Mike Lindsay, second.
I heard Mr. Lindsay. A second by Mr. Lindsay. Is there any discussion? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, item 3, approval of the minutes of the September 17th meeting of the Commission on School Accreditation. At this time, I'll entertain a motion for approval of the September 17th minutes. Do I have a second? Second by Ms. Foster. Is there any discussion? All right, all in favor? Opposed? The motion carries. Okay, item 4, approval to downgrade the accreditation status of the Carroll County School District from accredited to probation.
Yes, so in your backup materials, under item 4, you were provided with the investigative audit report that was issued to the Carroll County, as well as their response. And you'll note there are terrible findings that we have, so therefore we are asking that you accept the recommendation to let us downgrade them to probation.
All right, do the commission members have any questions?
Remainder of which still requires.
Findings. Roy Gill, so moved.
Have a motion by Mr. Gill to down, and a second by Ms. Barfield. Is there any discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. Okay, item 5, Consideration of request to revise the accreditation policies in Mississippi Administrative Code 724, Mississippi Public Schools Accountability Standards 2019.
So in this packet material that we gave you, very similar to what we did a couple, meetings ago, for you to do a review, and we have been trying to clean up, the policy. So we're provided with a red line version and then a clean black version, that would look like, it's what it would look like if all the, changes are accepted. So what we're asking for you to do today is just to let us move it to the state board, ask the state board to begin the APA process, to put it out for APA.
Recognize that the edit updates the number of congressional districts, but in removing that and just adding the note that there would be no school district with more than one representative, there's not an assurance really of across the state representation now. Was there any discussion on, in other words, all 15 members could potentially come from 15 different school districts, but only in a couple of areas of the state?
No, according to 3773 of the statute, it's
Mhm.
not a congressional district.
Ah.
And what, the MDE is hoping to see through legislation,
what the MDE hopes to seek through legislation is that it's going to be the 4 congressional districts and 3 at large, similar to what is in the licensure. It's been operating under 5 congressional districts, and that remains difficult when it's unclear always which congressional district map you're supposed to be relying on. There are AG opinions out there that speak to that, but as people continue to move, the hope is to get it to what the 4 congressional districts are and 3 at large, but everything else will remain the same. We're trying to remove it from policy, what it speaks to just say in accordance with the statute, and that way if we can get the statute to change, we'll move forward from there.
A couple of us were discussing ahead of time, just for clarification. 4.2.3, the financial rewards, that is not the new teacher incentives for being an A district or B district.
We'll have to look into that one then. Before we take it to the board, we'll try to get some clarity on it.
I read it, usually when a school is moved to probation, it did state that with the help of MDE, giving them guidance and helping, and that was taken out. So will the MDE not be assisting districts when they are on probation or lose their accreditation?
On probation.
That's what, okay, that's, just want to be sure we want.
working on it for so long. Where we are with that.
Yeah, I think probably all we need to do in that section, is just get it on the governor's office and replace it with the current policy. And statute that we're operating. And replace that with it. And then that, the responses, but the corrective action plan has to be what the district is assignment, so they should or withdrawn status and something along the lines of that.
Other questions from the commission? All right, item 6, approval to submit request to the State Board of Education to begin the Administrative Procedures Act process to revise the accreditation policies in Mississippi Administrative Code 724, Mississippi Public School Accountability Standards 2019. I'll entertain a motion for approval.
Second, Mr. Lewis.
Discussion? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries. All right, item 7, report of the Internal Review Committee's decision of a final accountability results in accordance with Accreditation Policy 3.1.4 of the Mississippi Public School Accountability Standards 2019. Have Mr. Burrow from MDE.
Okay, so good morning. The Internal Review Committee met and discussed the two appeals that were received regarding final accountability results in accordance with Policy 3.1.4. One district appealed the graduation rate used in the accountability calculation for one of their high schools, and the other district appealed participation rate calculations for 2 of its elementary schools. The North Bolivar Consolidated School District appealed the graduation rate of 77.5% that was applied to the accountability calculation for Northside High School, a newly titled school with a different configuration in the 2018-19 school year. The district requested in the final appeal that the district graduation rate of 80% be applied to the accountability calculation for Northside High School. And after review of Accountability Business Rules 8.5 and 20.1, the committee voted to approve or deny the request, and the members unanimously voted to deny the request. The George County School District appealed the participation rate calculation of 2 elementary schools. Both schools have participation rates under 95%, which results in a dropped letter grade assignment. The district states that both schools had students that withdrew before the testing period began. Bendale Elementary School had 2 such students, and George County Middle School had 3 such students that were appealed. Additionally, George County Middle School had 16 students appealed whose assessment was invalidated because the students were promoted to grade 8 after being administered grade 7 MAP assessments. According to business policy, an invalidation counts as not tested. The committee considered that Bendale Elementary School had 5 other students that either did not participate in the required assessments or had their assessments invalidated that could have brought the school's participation rate up over 95%. Also, the committee discussed the validity of the invalidations for the other students. The committee then voted to approve or deny the request, and the members unanimously voted to deny the request. Have any questions? It has been the policy of the agency to calculate participation rates based on all students enrolled in the month of April. So month 8, which is the testing, the month of testing. So it's regardless of the date of enrollment, just if a student is enrolled in the month of April, they're included in the denominator for the participation rate calculation. That's correct. I think there's, again, I wasn't here when that policy was initiated. It's been in place for many years. But the committee did discuss that to some extent, and I think there was some concerns about variability in the testing windows, depending on the testing type, and the fact that the testing window changes, can change from year to year. Also concerns in the past with districts having the ability to maybe withdraw students in anticipation of upcoming testing. That was what the committee discussed that has occurred and has the potential to occur. And certainly in anything in accountability, when we make policies regarding accountability, we have to consider the ability of the potential for manipulation of data to affect accountability calculations and results. Yeah, another thing that the committee discussed was, this certainly is, as with anything in the accountability system, open for review and discussion. It's been this way for many years. That doesn't necessarily mean that it can't be reconsidered or changed. But again, I think the concern would be to get multiple program offices involved to ensure that there's not the potential for a negative impact if we were to change how that calculation is done. Certainly we want to prevent any, as I said before, any possibility of manipulation of data or enrollment regarding calculation of participation rates in schools. So it's certainly something that the task force could review.
Like they're just being penalized because
Yeah.
that's the way it's always been.
Well, and we discussed the fact that the school had other students that negatively impacted their participation rate. That these weren't the only 2 students that were involved. There were 2 students that had that were ungraded students, so they had an IEP, and they were supposed to be graded based on their peer age, and they were not graded based on their peer age, so their tests were invalid. Had those 2 students been assessed appropriately, their participation rate would have been over 95%. Certainly these 2 students, if we consider them by themselves, they could have raised their participation rate over 95%, but so could have the other students that impacted the participation rate. So that was kind of the discussion that occurred with the committee.
So there was 5 invalidations plus the.
There were 2 students whose assessments were invalidated because they were tested off peer.
Off grade level, okay.
Then there were 3 students who were missing 1 or more assessments, and then you had the 2 students that withdrew April 3rd.
Accepted or taken away from the number, that would have raised their rate to 95%.
It would have by itself, yeah. This is a small in count in the school. Of course, each student counts multiple times for participation rates. I want to say it was 235 in the denominator. I'd have to pull the data, but yeah, relatively small in count in the school. 235, considering that you've got students counting twice in grades other than 5th grade. In 5th grade, students count 3 times in the denominator. And the two students that they appealed that withdrew in April were fifth graders. So, yeah.
Documented anywhere that the count is as of the beginning of the month of testing, or?
It is not in the accountability business rules, no. But certainly, it would be required that we have a definition of when we choose what students are included in participation rates if we were to change it from what the policy or what the agency has been doing for many years. Because at this point we have precedents. This is the way it's been done. So if we were to change that, it would need to go into the business rules, I would think.
So did the two students withdraw and transfer to another school? Did they take the assessment at all?
They withdrew to homeschool on the same day, yeah, April 3rd. Oh. There should only be one level.
D to a D, I thought.
That's right, yeah. I'm sorry. I was just curious.
Well, so they. And again, we have two schools affected in Georgia County.
Oh, that's what we're about to get into. So, okay. So,
The way that you've approved the agenda, this is just, Alan's opportunity to tell you what happened at the internal review meeting. The next agenda item will be the actual appeal.
The next agenda, okay. The next agenda item will be the actual appeals. So you'll hear from both the districts, and then Alan will have the opportunity to explain MD's and the internal review committee's position based on policy and business rules.
Yeah, I mean, so far what I've discussed is just what occurred in the committee and what was discussed in the committee.
okay, so we will move on then to item 8. Commission members and guests. Before we begin, I just want to note that for item 8, the commission will follow policy 3.0 in the Mississippi Public Schools Accountability Standards 2019, and the commission will adhere to the same process that occurred during the appeals of the 17-18 accountability results. In accordance with policy 3.4, the superintendent may request to address the commission regarding the appeal of the final results. Each district superintendent has requested to address the commission, and per protocol, each superintendent shall be allotted 45 minutes. A timekeeper will provide you with notice when 5 minutes and 1 minute remain. No additional time shall be provided. Following each superintendent's timed presentation, the commission will be allowed to ask questions of the superintendent. After all superintendents have presented, the MDE will be allowed to present for 45 minutes. A timekeeper will provide the MDE representative with notice when 5 minutes and 1 minute remain. No additional time shall be provided. Following the MDE's presentation, the commission will be allowed to ask questions of either the MDE or the superintendents. Commission members, please do not interrupt the district or the MDE representative during their allotted time. The commission will hear from the districts in the following order. First, North Bolivar Consolidated School District, and second, George County School District. So, North Bolivar, if you are ready. Yeah, we'll get our time ready, and I believe, was this the PowerPoint? Yeah. Yes, okay.
I have a copy of my PowerPoint I'd like to pass out. This is permissible.
right, Mr. Smith, you have 45 minutes.
First of all, let me say good morning. I'd like to thank the commission for allowing me the opportunity to appear before you and express the concerns of the North Bolivar Consolidated School District as it relates to the graduation rate of the new high school. We are appealing the found accountability rating because the new high school, Northside High School, received a graduation rate of one of the schools that were combined as opposed to the rate of both schools that were combined. And I want to give you some background information on what has happened in this district. As you look at the chart, that you will see that 77.5 is the graduation rate of Broad Street High School. That was one of the high schools that was consolidated. 82.5 is the graduation rate of the second high school, for John F. Kennedy Memorial High School, that was consolidated. 80 is the graduation rate of the district. There was a third school district, a school that was consolidated. That was Shelby Middle School. Some of those students went to the new high school. We went from approximately, at that high school of Broad Street High School, there was 160 students in that school. The enrollment went to over 300 students. We contend that the graduation rate should have been the combined graduation rate of the both high schools, which is 80. What you have here now, because they arbitrarily use 77.5, all of the students that's counted in the graduation rate is in one school. So that school should have the same rate as the district as provided by the numbers from the state. I think it's important that you understand why this move took place. I became superintendent in the last week of June of 1917. And at that time, the district was in some deep financial troubles. They were spending approximately $1.2 million more than they was taking in. They had just about depleted the 16th section revenue funds. We had not had an audit since 2014. Some of the things that happened since then, we have completed all of our audits. FY18 audit is in the Office of State Auditors. We have embarked on a $1.5 million improvement plan for new roofing, new labs, and other academic improvement. All of this is a direct result of the consolidation effort. The school board and some community members felt that the only way that we could stay afloat and save the district was to make these changes. So that you fully understand what I'm talking about, IT Montgomery was a school that had K-6. Brooks Elementary was a school in the district that had pre-K through 4. Shelby Middle School had grades 5 through 8 in one part of the district. John F. Kennedy, which was one of the high schools, had grades 7 through 12. Broad Street High School had grades 9 through 12. We had 2 central offices. Essentially what we did was IT Montgomery remained a K-6. Brooks Elementary went to K-6. Northside High School took all of the students that was in John F. Kennedy and Broad Street High School, in addition to some of the students that was in Shelby Middle School. Basically, Northside High School was a school district that took in 3 ELF districts. And we felt that the only way that we could address the financial problem and the academic problem was to combine them to make the best use of our teachers and our financial resources. In essence, I think the board and the community should be commended for doing the job that needed to be done. Now, I will tell you, this was not an easy task. We went through a 6-month-long period of fighting in the court that eventually went all the way to the state Supreme Court. Once we did get that solved, we had some more protesters. We spent challenges was first 10 days, there were a lot of parents that held students out. We had a 21 teacher vacancy, 3F schools, but out of that came some positives. We had a strategic plan that was addressed, built by about 60 people. We got about 35 people to participate in that process. That was led by the State Department of Education. We devised a plan out of that strategic planning process to fill our vacancies. We went out and we hired 19 certified teachers as a result of that plan. We reorganized. We had two new principals. We reorganized how we were doing our curriculum. We went from one curriculum director to two, one for secondary and one for high school. We put a lead teacher in each one of our schools. We put department chairs in the high school to address and help the building administrator supervise the instructional program. We had reading and math interventionists in Brooks, and we embarked on a plan to involve more partnerships and community involvement in our schools. If you look at Northside High School, their 7th through 8th grade students generated in the accountability model 170 points. I want to point out to you, again, the graduation rate of 77.5 was used as Northside High School graduation rate. And if you use that graduation rate, Northside High School comes out to be a F. They generated 508 points. Now, I will also tell you, when you consider this, think like this. If you use the 77.5, you're only taking in consideration of those students that was in the old Broad Street High School. You're not even considering the students that came from John F. Kennedy High School that's in that same building now, not the students that came from Shelby Middle School that's in that building now. I asked Mr. Burrows what was the rationale for using Broad Street's graduation rate. And I was told that it was tradition, that's how they've always done it. It was tied to the actual building that the students are in. I would respectfully ask the commission, the building shouldn't be a factor in the graduation rate. We should be looking at the students that's in the building. What are they doing academically? And that's all we're asking here. Give us the graduation rate of the students that actually earn the rate. Look at this chart. That's 82.5. That's the graduation rate of John F. Kennedy High School. If you use the model of Jeff's old Broad Street graduation rate, these students are not a factor in the assigning of the district grade, of the school grade. If you use this one, it generates 514 points, and the graduation rate will help the school move up to a D. Now, we're not asking for that one. All we're asking for is that you use 80, which is the district. It behooves me to understand, how can the district have an 80 and the students that make up the districts are in one school and that school gets a 77.5? There's no rhyme or reason for it, other than we've always done it that way. I would submit to you that the school board members in the community have done what we've asked. We have corrected our financial problems. We are addressing our academic problems. We asked those kids to come in, to give up their school, to work hard, and our goal was to move up one grade level every year. Based on the results of the student that actually is in that school district, they should be moved up from an F to a D based on what's applicable in that school. That's all we're asking, is that give us the grade that's reflective of the students in the.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Okay, commission members, do you have any questions for Mr. Smith?
Slide that shows your final rates, the cohort, if you want to go back a couple from the end there. It says 2014 final rates. Go back. This one.
Okay, that is the rate that they use to compute the graduation rate. That is the rate that this year was assigned. This three numbers I have, that is what we get from the state. That's how they compute it.
I'm just questioning the year that says 2014, because I know that the graduation rate lags for the accountability by 1 year. So I was just trying to clarify the graduation rates for which year that went into the calculation.
From 14, 15, 16, 17, 18.
So you have one high school right now. All right. May of 18, that would be the graduation cohort that was calculated. How many high schools were there? You had
For the
one.
beginning of the 18-19 school year was the first year of Northside High School.
Okay, so the 17-18 school year, which would have been May of 18, that would have been your graduation. How many high schools did you have? The school year 17-18. How many high schools did you have? You had 2 high schools. Okay, your 18-19 accountability is based on that May of 18's cohort graduation, which you had 2 at that time, correct? Okay. One was the 77.5, and that's the one they use, that one as that feeder pattern of that high school. Okay.
I think how that one was selected would be the issue. If you had 2, how did you select this one?
Remind me again, how many students were in each of the 2 schools?
In the one that had a 77.5, you had approximately 161 students. In the one that was 82.5, you had approximately 266 students in grades 7 through 12.
The other one was 9 through 12. And that is the site of the current school.
Other count were in another location the year before, in another building. Okay.
So May of 2018, the class we graduated was a combination of Broad Street and JFK. May of 2018. No, this is what I'm.
Excuse me, May of 20.
May of 2018, we have Northside High School.
Northside didn't come in until July of
18-19.
2 graduation ceremonies, basically.
Correct.
combination of
That
students.
building number for the federal government is the only rationale behind it.
Questions? I thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Okay, at this time we'll hear from George County School District. I understand that the superintendent, Ms. Tuchard, is not available this morning, but Dr. King is going to present, and it is written in the policy that we will hear from the superintendent, but the MDE has no objection to Dr. King presenting. Is that correct, Dr. King?
I would like to thank the commission to allow me to step in for Ms. Tuchard. She has been put in the hospital suddenly late yesterday afternoon, and I would like for our district to represent George County Schools in this appeal process. Due to the late nature of having to take this over, I did not have a chance to prepare a PowerPoint. However, I got a written letter that I would like to read to the commission. Also, I have some additional information I would like to hand out, but Dr. Malone advised me that I would have to ask the permission of the chairperson of the commission and also have the information reviewed by the commission's attorney if they're present.
Is this information that was not provided to the internal review committee?
Yes, ma'am.
We're gonna have to stick to the policy with only going to. The past, what we've done, if it was not provided to the internal review committee, we have not, let the commission have it. Of course, if the commission would like to discuss it, to be able to look at it, that is at the will and pleasure of the commission, so.
Okay. I make a
They would see a new material if it helps.
can I make a motion that we see it?
My understanding is the request that is coming, that came before in George County has been changed from what the original. North Bolivar, the request that was before the internal review committee.
For the preliminary result was different than what it was for the final result. But
But based on the fact that they were not provided with any type of PowerPoint, I would move that you guys remain consistent with how you're treating the districts and allow him to provide whatever information he has. As long as it does not include any information that may be privileged and confidential related to student information. So just to be clear, this information that was on the PowerPoint was not provided to the internal review committee, but you all were permitted to see this. It was part of.
Yes, ma'am.
Does it contain any personally identifiable information related to students' names?
No, but it does have the participation rate out of the Nextera platform, what the school test coordinators could see at the school as they were assessing the kids to make sure that they got over 95%. Because in the example of like Bendale Elementary, which was mentioned, what the test coordinator could see, what I could see was the school was at 100% participation. Right, I have what I submitted the second time on her request, and the information is redacted.
So if it's the commission's pleasure to allow the information, which I would recommend, based on the fact that we allowed information from North Bolivar, I would, if you're in that position, I would also ask.
Hey. This.
About anything before you start.
We don't know what the internal review You're gonna need to hold it like this.
Come on, Sarah.
I mean, in case you have any questions. Okay, bye now.
Okay, but my text said we can't hear the commission. It didn't say we couldn't hear Paul. How are you doing?
We're just gonna give the district a few more minutes. There were some security items that they needed to redact, actually not personally identifiable information, so we're just letting them redact those, and then we can get started.
Make sure everybody's doing this.
Madam Chairperson, are we ready to start?
I believe we are. All right, Mr. King, take it away.
Okay, I would like to start out by reading the memorandum you have and then going over a few of the items in the folder to explain sort of what the schools were seeing as testing was unfolding this past spring, and then conclude and answer any questions that the commission has. All right, based on policy 314, George County School District would like to appeal the final accountability results for Bendale Elementary and George County Middle School. Please read the letters from the principals. The letters help provide context to the evidence that was submitted to the internal review committee. Issues 2 and 3 at Bendale dealt with students who withdrew before the testing window opened. Therefore, the school had no opportunity to assess these students. One thing that's important to understand about that particular situation is these students were fifth graders. So they were in the denominator for ELA, math, and science. So it hit the school 6 times in terms of their participation calculation. If these students were not included in the denominator, the school would have had a participation rate of 96.04%. The issues 17 and 20 at George County Middle School are the same. They involve students that withdrew before the testing window opened. The school had no opportunity to assess these students. The remaining issues at George County Middle School involve a program called the Star Academy. The Star Academy is a program designed to help students that are 2 or more years behind grade level and get caught up to graduate with their peers once they enter high school. Please follow the information, the following information will serve as an additional documentation to support our appeal. In the folder that I provided for you, I included the participation information during the testing window. My school test coordinators and myself, I'm the district test coordinator, I monitor participation very closely, and at periodic times throughout the testing window, I will print out that participation to ensure that our schools go over the 95%. And what you will see with the middle school, at one time, I checked it, and then later on I followed up and they were at 96% based on what we could see in the Nextera platform. And of course, that is the actual testing platform as opposed to getting the student rosters out of Emesis, which those are 2 different things. Bendale Elementary shows 100% participation for ELA and math. So, you know, that came as a shock to myself and the principal and the school test coordinator at the school when what we could see the school was at 100% and all of a sudden we don't even make 95. And so we were monitoring this very closely, making every effort to achieve the participation rate required. The letters provide some context from the schools. There is also a presentation in there about what the Star Academy is about and what it attempts to do. These students take 7th and 8th grade classes in block scheduling format during the course of 1 school year at George County Middle School. After the school year is over, they are promoted to 8th grade and then move on to high school. And you got a copy in there of the testing calendar. Now, one of the things I want to bring to the Commission's attention that's already come up is there a written policy of using the month 8 Emesis roster as the basis for participation. If not, we respectfully request the Commission reconsider the decision based on the effects it has on the school with such a small population. And if that is going to be used, should that not be communicated to the district? That is where the participation is going to be based from, is that month 8 Emesis rosters. We had a couple concerns with that. Mr. Burrows had a phone conference with us and was very helpful in helping us understand how MDE's position on this and what was going on. But from the first of the month to the beginning of the testing window, there was about a week and a half or 2 weeks. That puts the school districts in a position if someone comes up to withdraw, saying, well, we don't want you to withdraw your student, which legally we cannot keep a parent from withdrawing their child. The other thing it puts the school districts, especially with very small schools like Bendale, in a position is then, are we to back up the withdrawal date, which would be keeping inaccurate records and false information. And so it puts the school districts in a precarious situation when participation is not based on the beginning of the actual testing window and the ending of the testing window. So I just wanted to emphasize that and ask y'all to consider that in your decision. Another thing to consider for George County Middle School, these students were in Emesis as 7th graders. the pre-ID file, which is pulled out of Emesis by MDE and then cleaned up and presented to Questar, which is then uploaded into Nextera, also identified the students as seventh graders. So that file would have been pulled at some time during January or February, cleaned up and put in to be ready to process sometime in March to get ready for the testing coordinators to set up their sessions and work on their materials. So at the time they pulled that file, which would have been a minimum midway through the school year, they viewed the students as being seventh graders as well. And so with us looking at the participation, the coding of how they were uploaded into the Nextera platform, the school was completely unaware that MDE would view them as testing off grade level. So based on those considerations, I would like for y'all to reconsider our final accountability ratings for Bendale and George County Middle School. And I will be happy to entertain any questions. I brought Ms. Miller with me, who is principal of the middle school and has been running this Star Academy since its inception, if you have any questions.
Questions for Dr. King?
First, I want to look at the middle school. So, am I correct that it's compacted 2 years, 7th and 8th? And do you promote those in MSIS in December after the first semester, or do they remain a 7th grader for the entire year?
Remain a 7th grader for the entire year. The program contains 8th grade students also, and if we promote the 8th grade students in December, then they can no longer participate in sports or extracurricular activities at the middle school level.
Okay, so the two students in questions were 7th graders.
It's actually 16.
16.
I mean,
Questions.
the students, 16. Okay, they were
7th
7th graders.
Correct.
All right, and they are regular ed students that are in this program, and you tested them on what assessment, what MAP assessment, 7th or 8th?
7th grade.
7th grade.
So they were all counted as not taken. Where's the problem?
Yes, ma'am. Their scores were invalidated as being off grade level. In other words, they actually participated in the 7th grade assessment for ELA and math, but when we get the preliminary accountability results, then you start noticing the participation is dropped, and they invalidated their test because they were supposedly off grade level.
They counted against us on the 8th grade test, which would be 3 tests: ELA, math, and science. Most all of them.
So they do not get promoted, so they go from 7th grade to 9th grade?
They get promoted to 8th grade and then promoted to 9th grade at the end of the school year.
So at the end of the school year, they're promoted to 8th grade, and then the month
Correct.
10, they go to 9th grade?
Correct. Again, it is a catch-up program, a dropout prevention program.
Basically work with them in that 7th grade year, and based on the assessment, determine that they have caught up, they closed the gap, and they now could be considered 8th graders going into the 9th grade.
Correct. Based on the credits that they earn. That is correct.
What happens if they don't?
If they are not successful, they move to the regular 8th grade classrooms.
And this program is being conducted with MDE's approval, the actual STAR program.
6?
6 years.
And we've never had this happen until this time.
Past the 7th graders were not considered invalidated.
Yes, ma'am.
Take them out of the picture and just used the ones that withdrew before they could take the test, would that have changed your participation rate to anything?
No, ma'am.
Two different schools, right? We're talking about the middle school right now. The 16 students in question are all from the Starry program, right?
Yes, sir, but there are 3 students that also withdrew before the testing window began at the middle school as well. Yes, ma'am.
Or were invalidated, 3 withdrew. Were there any that were still eligible at your school to take the test that did not take the test?
There were students who were absent that did not take the test, yes. But
I would have to get that information for you. I didn't bring that with me.
Those students that were still enrolled would have tested. Would that have got you?
no,
No.
yes.
Okay, that's what I didn't understand.
No, sir, I would have to get that for you.
I'm a non-education person, so the assessment test, is it just 8 through 12, or? So
Ma'am,
if
it's,
they did not, like if they were a 7th grader and they took it, shouldn't that have counted for the 7th grade assessment?
That is our position, yes.
That's what's been going on. Why did it change this year? Why did it change? You said you've been doing the same thing the whole time and it's never been counted. So why did it change?
Have not received an explanation from the department on that.
So you're telling me historically, excuse me, year before last, this program was in place. They remained a 7th grader all year long. You gave them the 7th grade assessment, and they were not invalidated the year before.
Yes, sir.
Were you ever, so that you were, there was never any question of you're supposed to change their grade level at Christmas to 8th grade, and then they take the 8th grade assessment second semester. Never was instructed to do that.
No.
7th grade, all year long. They started the year in 7th grade. Their emphasis all year long is 7th grade.
Gave them the 7th grade test.
Why would they, and they took a 7th grade test, why would they not count as being tested? Because it goes by what's in emphasis, and I guess we're doing the department. I guess that's a question for the department. But I guess that's they're there year long. I don't understand the 8th, 9th piece at the end, but okay, maybe that's not a question. That's what I understand.
Haven't been non-validated the 6 years prior. Without being given knowledge ahead of time that there was a change.
5 students that withdrew. I think I have 5 students in both schools total that withdrew. Did those students take the test in another district after they withdrew? So were those students tested?
Those students, to my knowledge, all left for homeschool. Yes, sir.
Other questions for the district? Okay, thank you very much for your time.
Thank
I would
you
like-
for your time.
I would like to thank the commission for allowing us to come in and hear our request.
Okay, commission members, I have heard that lunch is on its way. It is completely what you wish to do at this point. We can carry on with MDE's presentation and then break if you would like. Okay, all right. All right, very good. So now we will hear from MDE. Timekeeper ready? All right. All right, MDE, it is now your time. You will have 45 minutes.
Hey, so we're going to start with addressing bill by George County and a little background on the Star School and MDE's position on that. So we'll ask Ms. Clemens to speak on that.
Good morning. In reference to the Star School, I applaud any school district that would recognize the fact that students that are 2 or more years behind are less likely to graduate. And so I know in my experiences in schools that I've been in, we've had similar programs. Typically, they start in the 6th grade. And the idea is to compact the curriculum so that students can advance and get close to their peers as they approach their graduation date in hopes that they will make that date. However, I would say that when students are 4x4 blocked in a year, typically what would happen is those students would receive 7th grade instruction the first semester in a 4x4 block situation where they receive, if they're trying to say for a Carnegie unit, if in fact they were going for a Carnegie unit in 7th grade, they may not be. They would receive 140 hours of instruction in an 18-week period and 70 hours of instruction in a 9-week period. At that point in time, you would assess those students, determine their rate of growth. Are they prepared for an 8th grade curriculum? And if in fact they are, they would then go into that 8th grade curriculum study beginning in January, and then have the same 18-month period. So those students would be identified as early as January that they are 8th graders and would therefore sit for the 8th grade MAP assessment. In addition, the letter that was written stated that their justification for not promoting the students was so that they could participate in extracurricular activities. The MDE does not endorse justifications and decisions on academic progress, growth, promotion on extracurricular activities. That is not what we endorse. It was mentioned that we have approved this. I believe in the letter from the principal, it stated they had received funds maybe 6 years ago. I did review George County's waivers. They have 3 waivers currently. None of those waivers justify this action. In speaking with the district, I believe Alan can speak to this, Mr. Burr can speak to this more specifically. As we understand it, those students remain 7th grade until the very end of the school year. They were promoted to 8th grade. They remained in the 8th grade for about a day, and then they became 9th graders, which is a concern for us in the way it's not the compacted effort that's being made. We applaud that. It's just the way that it's being administered and the justification for the administration. Also, I don't know that we saw this in the committee. The district follows an established board policy that defines criteria for the academic promotion, progression, retention of students. Such criteria prohibit the retention of students for extracurricular purposes. So again, I just want to make the point that I in no way find or deter districts from looking at their student populations and finding opportunities to get those students through. But at the same time, we want to make sure that they are in a robust accelerated program. It's very difficult to find students who are 2 years behind, who have failed 2 grades up into the 6th grade and can actually master 2 grades in 1 year. Okay, these are probably struggling students that have struggled most of their academic career. We also encourage school districts who have a relatively large number, 16 students would possibly be maybe 3% or so, 3-4% of the student population. We also encourage districts not to wait to that middle school experience to really go down into their K-5 experience and determine what's happening in those grades to ensure that students aren't coming to the middle grade levels 2 years behind or 3 years behind in some cases.
Okay, and I just wanted to address a couple of other questions that came up during George County's presentation. The question about what has changed this year that invalidated these tests. I posed that question to the district as well on the phone, and they indicated that this was the first time that they promoted these students in month 9. In years past, they were just left in grade 7, and if they had not changed the grade assignment in month 9, we would not have known otherwise. So when you have, we're looking at month 9 for the accountability calculations. That is the month in which we pull demographic data on students and grade assignment. And if you change a student's grade assignment in the last month of the school year, and you've assessed them on some other grade level, then that test is invalidated because now the student has been assessed in a grade level that is inappropriate for the grade that was assigned for the student. And in this case, these students would have and did skip the 8th grade assessment. They never did and never would take the 8th grade assessments in ELA, math, and science by doing this. Also, the fact that Wendy pointed out, Ms. Clemens, I'm sorry, that these students were only enrolled in the 8th grade for 1 day. I asked the district what grade these students were put in at the beginning of this school year, being that they were in the 7th grade last year, they're in the 9th grade this year. So again, they skipped the 8th grade assessment. These students were not assessed in 8th grade science, ELA, or math. When the internal review committee reviewed the work of these students, they found that the coursework indicates that the students should have been tested on the 8th grade level assessment. Instead, they were assessed on the 7th grade level assessment. This school also, to your questions, had other students that did not take the required assessments. In a quick data review of their file, I show at least 16 students that missed 1 or more assessments. The department also has concerns about the fact that students within this school district that are ungraded, otherwise on an IEP, are not being assessed on the appropriate peer age level assessment. This is of great concern, not only the fact that this student population, SCD students are traditionally underserved, but also that at the state aggregate, we are working really hard to make sure that Mississippi tests appropriately all SCD students, and in this district that's not occurring. This issue regarding using month 8 for participation measures has not been challenged before. I believe in the letter the school stated that this was an unusual circumstance for this district, and that I told them that. What I told them was that we have not had a challenge in regard to month 8 being used for participation calculations because it hasn't been an issue that has affected the participation rate for a school by itself to take the school under the 95% participation rate. Generally, and as you see in this instance, there's other issues with the school and assessment that causes the participation rate to drop below 95%. It's not just the students that withdrew between April 1st and the first day of testing. There are other students that were not properly assessed or were not given all the assessments that are required. The department and the committee also has concerns regarding the students that were addressed as being withdrawn on April 3rd. And then this is in your backup material that was provided by the district. If you'll note that the enrollment information for these students, and let me start with the first one. This would be they have page numbers. The enrollment information that comes after this page that shows documentation promotion to 8th grade. There's this is issue 17 of 20 for George County. The next page shows the enrollment information for the student. This one withdrew April the 2nd, 2019. It shows 18 days off roll. The department found there were some consistencies across these students. The next student in the list shows 18 days off roll as well, with the same withdrawal date of April the 2nd. And the other two students that we have information, 19 days off roll with a withdrawal date of April the 1st. 17 days off roll with a withdrawal date of April 3rd. And 17 days off roll April 3rd on the other one. There's some consistencies there that the department found concern over. And that they all went to homeschool. Again, when we look at developing policies and we develop business rules regarding the accountability system, we are considering the potential for a district or school to manipulate data. This can be done through enrollment and withdrawal records, and these are things whether or not it was intentionally occurred, whether or not it intentionally occurred in this school. These are things that we have to consider whenever we're looking at policy and looking at data that we get from schools. This potential to manipulate the results for the accountability system. So that's something to be considered, especially when we see such consistencies in student records as we see with this. I guess lastly on my end, let's probably speak more to George County. There's precedent that's been established in how we calculate participation rates. This has been in play for many years. Nothing's changed this year. While the business rules are silent on exactly what month or day we use for the denominator participation rates, this is nothing new. This has been occurring for many years. I think in the case for George County this year, they had a lot of invalidations that resulted in a participation rate that is below 95% and has raised a flag for them. We see this as not an issue with month 8 enrollment and students that withdraw between the first day of the month and the first day of state testing. This is an issue of improperly assessing students.
So I think Mr. Beer has addressed everything. I just wanted to point out that with all of the presentations between assessment and accountability, we really focus not only on the business rules of the statewide accountability system, but of the rules of the statewide assessment system and Appendix F. And there's clearly rules outlined in Appendix F related to the statewide assessment system that all eligible students are assessed. I mean, that is part of the federal requirement that 100% of our student population is tested. And then, of course, that threshold is set at the 95% for those students that have unforeseen circumstances, medical emergencies, so on and so forth, that are clearly outlined in Appendix F. And just, overall from the standpoint, the agency, feels like that all districts are aware that it's the intent and that it's very important to target all students and test all students so that you have that flexibility between the 95% and the 100% for those unforeseen circumstances. And as Mr. Bureau mentioned earlier in the introduction, I think the Internal Review Committee was certainly based on some things that Ms. Foster pointed out, that it's not clearly identified in the participation rules that it's month 8. I mean, this is the way that the calculation has always been done, and it's equitably applied to all districts. So every district in the state that had a student that transferred out within the same time frame, those students also counted as not tested for those districts, so that it has been applied equitable. But we have added this to the list for the upcoming accountability task force to take a look at that, to see if there is any changes that need to be made in this business rule or any clarifications in documentation. And again, I think it was just an overall concern of the internal review committee about the accuracy of the data reporting. I know it was stated in the presentation that, we send the pre-ID, the role that we play in pre-ID files, but we rely on the data that the district inputs into MSIS and Nextera. You know what your districts know what their grade classifications of the students are, not the MDE. It's the district's determination of what is the appropriate grade level, as well as the correct information that's identified in MSIS. And again, the internal review committee spent a whole lot of time going through the information that's provided, not only in MSIS, and then to see that with one of the schools, or the 5 withdrawals that were transferred, they all had 17, 18, and 19 days, had within 3 days of the same days off record, and then that they all withdrew to homeschool within 3 calendar days between April 1st to April the 3rd, and so that was just something that they used to substantiate the concerns about the accuracy of the reporting of data in MSIS in accordance with Accreditation Policy 2.1. That concludes further. Yeah, so I didn't know if it was the same 45 minutes for North Bolivar. Is it all in the same presentation?
I mean, that should be fine.
But that's because last year all 3 appeals were of the same nature. So but anyway, I think we'll be fine within the 45 minutes. But the appeals were all the same last year, so it only required 1 MDE response, and these differ.
Okay, that will be fine. All right, so in regard to North Bolivar, I did discuss this issue with the school district, as I do with a lot of internal review appeals that are denied. This issue really is addressed in policy. Have provided in your information on page 33 and 37. First being that Business Rule 8.5 provides that a school district graduation rate that's applied in the graduation component of the accountability system is lagged 1 year. That is so that we can capture students that graduate during the summer months. So we go through the close of summer activity with districts having until an October 27th deadline to enter in summer activity for the prior school year. So we're coming up on the deadline for the prior academic year. Students can graduate up until July 31st each year and still be counted as a graduate in a cohort. So that's the reason for the lagging of graduation rates. And then Business Rule 20.1 addresses the fact that a school's accountability calculations are based on the grade configuration of the school on the date that corresponds with FAA at the time of testing. Calculations are applied to the school the following year, regardless of any reconfigurations or redistricting that takes place during the summer after testing or during the school year before testing. There's many thoughts on this. Districts have the ability to make local decisions regarding configurations, reconfigurations, consolidations of schools, changing the names of schools. This is not something that the agency regulates. It's a local decision. We do, however, need to ensure that a district or school cannot make such changes in order to get away from or get around accountability. A school that has, if we have the data on a school for accountability purposes, we are going to calculate it and we're going to report it the following year, regardless of any changes that a district may make regarding a school. You can change the configuration of a school. You can change the name of a school. We're still going to report accountability data that the following year for that school. This is consistently applied across local decisions for reconfigurations or consolidations, also at state level consolidations. So for example, if you've got Bolivar County and Greenwood that consolidated this school year, we still report accountability results for Greenwood School District and separately for Leflore County School District. We still report their graduation rates. Their graduation rates are lagged a year. The same thing applies for North Bolivar School District. North Bolivar School District is not the only one that had reconfigurations this year. They're not the only school district that combined high schools this year. They are treated the same manner as any other school or any other district in the state, and the district should make considerations regarding the impact of accountability whenever they make this local decision. The rules are clear. The rules are published. We're not trying to hide anything. This is in the business rules. If you change your configuration of your school, you'll still have accountability results reported, and grad rates are lagged a year. This school maintains the same school code, and it's still the same campus that it was before, although they have combined student populations. This school maintains the graduation rate from the year prior because it's lagged a year and reported with their accountability results. Could we assign some other graduation rate to the school? Yes, we could. Obviously, the district pointed out two possibilities in their first appeal to MDE. They asked for the higher of the two rates. In the final appeal, they asked for the district rate. But I think policy speaks pretty clearly to how this applies, how graduation rates are applied. And again, whenever we develop policy, we have to consider any perverse incentives on the part of school or districts to manipulate or to get around accountability results. Whether or not that's intentional in this case, I'm not making that statement. I'm just saying that this is another policy in the business rules that are there specifically to ensure that a school or district can make local decisions but can't avoid accountability results for their schools and districts. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you very much. So commission members may now ask questions of MDE or any of the superintendents.
If you don't mind, I'll just ask one question based on what Mr. Burr just said. So back to the comment about it's the policy to report the accountability data for all the students. I guess I'm curious what happened then to the students who are now not reflected in the graduation rate that were at JFK because you didn't aggregate the two high schools in coming up with it. In other words, you took the code for the one school, but those of the 260 some odd that were high schoolers, their graduation rate doesn't factor in. I'm trying to figure out the...
Yeah, well, we doesn't factor into accountability. It's still reported. The grad rate is still reported. I'm trying to think technically if we were to calculate, we would not have other data, other accountability data for that school to calculate an accountability rating because grad rates are lagged a year. So now we've got a year with that grad rate hanging out there, but we don't have any accountability data to go with it. So we couldn't use it in accountability calculations for that reason. No, we use the score, right? We use the score that is tied to the building code. to the school code.
That the LEA identified. When schools reconfigure and new school codes are established, the LEA has the opportunity to use an existing school code or ask for a new one to be created. And in this case, that's the school.
It's not in a grad rate calculation for accountability purposes. It is included in the district accountability rating. Yeah.
But the student score, like on a back mapped algebra score, follows them to the due school and is built into the school accountability.
If there was well, it wouldn't be back mapping, it would be banking.
Banking. I'm sorry. I was going
no.
too many years back. I went too many years.
If a student score is banked, the student can switch schools, and as long as they're in the same district, it's carried over to where they're enrolled in the 10th grade. In some districts have multiple high schools and multiple middle schools. The student could move from one high school to another from 9th to 10th grade, for example. The banked score is going to be tied to where they're enrolled in the 10th grade. Yeah, as long as they're in the same district. The banked score has to be in the same district.
Concepts still apply to the senior that just graduated to the new school in the same district? In other words, the kids that they got credit for graduating at the old school went to the new school. When they combined schools, that wouldn't follow that.
Well, yeah, I think the issue is that we're talking about two different pieces.
Not the same cohort of students right there. You've got two different cohorts, because when you're talking about assessment data, you're talking about currently in physical year. But then when you're talking about grad rate, it's once removed on a lagging indicator, so those kids never attended that school. Does that make sense?
Once they reconfigure and consolidate, they'll all be attributed to the one new school. All students that transfer to that new school.
Change to the John F. Kennedy building, the graduation rate would have been 82.5 for the new school. Is that correct?
By name.
And school code.
Which is the LEA. The LEA drives that. It's
but that's how it's done.
Right,
okay.
right. The school configuration, the reconfiguration determination is local district authority. School code, the LEA directs that when they notify the district that their local board has approved the reconfiguration and the circumstances around the reconfiguration. That's right. That's right.
Where the numbers were.
Most of the reconfiguration's got to be based on the size of the facility, where they don't have a choice of what facility they're going into.
I don't know. That's a local district decision how they reconfigure and where they place schools.
And they're being penalized for trying to improve their district. And I would like to applaud them for the consolidation and the advancement in your money problems. I'm very impressed with what y'all have done in a short period of time.
I understood what you just said. They could have consolidated the schools into the facility of the former Broad Street, but used the school code of 004, the former.
That's all a local school district decision, MDE.
Or a total different number.
Or a total different number.
Because of that, these
but it lags.
other graduates are not included. Because of that choice, that's the reason these other graduates are not included.
It exists as the new high school because it's lagged a year.
They're not being attributed to the
graduation
school.
rate, they are.
Yeah, they're in the district level aggregate.
Because the district is treated like one K-12 school.
Ask questions if anybody you would like to ask a question of.
opportunity to ask questions of
That's an exception. It could be a program exception, I guess.
So, yeah,
Any Carnegie unit.
yes, ma'am. That rule changed, a few years back, to allow additional Carnegie units, and now, within the last couple of years, it's been expanded to any course code, grades 7 through 12, that has the same course content, the required number of, instructional time. You can earn a Carnegie unit, beginning in 7th grade. Accreditation policy 20, let's see.
While she's looking that up, Superintendent Smith, I had a question. If you could come to the mic, please. I'm just curious because as we were discussing your selection of school codes, you know, clearly your body language indicated that wasn't your understanding, so I was curious to hear your input.
That wasn't a process that we used. What happened when we consolidated, we were into the school year and we had not been signed a new code. We sent a letter to MDE asking for a new code. Consequently, they called and said, we're going to assign you this code because that's the building that you're in. So we never asked, we asked for a new code because we wanted to get all our information in MSS and whatever. So that was arbitrarily assigned by them, and at that point, we didn't see any reason why we should complain.
We would have to confirm that with OTSS. Right, yeah. I mean, that, generally, that, I mean, that's what, I mean, the districts have to submit a request to educational accountability, and then all the program offices are copied based on their local board approval and what their designations are, and that's what OTSS uses to set up the MSIS IDs. Well,
Don't correct it, then they'll be invalidated
so
after the fact.
So, Ms. Clemens may can speak to this, but if we were not aware, I mean, as Mr. Bureau explained, the MDE was made aware when they enrolled the students at the end of the year for a period of 1 day in the 8th grade. So that MSIS.
According to the district, this was the first year that they changed the promotion to the last month of the school year. So we were not aware that this was occurring. And again, our concern, the biggest concern here is that the students were essentially skipping the 8th grade assessment.
Is that in fact for this past year a change in practice with regard to your STAR program, Dr. King, or? Come to the mic.
Trying to find a place to sit down. The students have, this program's been ongoing for 6 years. And this was the first year, instead of being promoted, I think in month 10, they were done in month 9. No, month 10. It was month 9, right? It was after at the very end of the school year.
they were promoted in month 9 instead of doing the summer activity report, which is month 10.
Correct.
So in the summer activity report, typically they were just promoted to 9th grade, so they were never even initialized as an 8th grader, so they went from 7 to 9 in the summer activity report. Is that correct?
They were promoted, previously they were promoted with the mass promotion at the end of the school year. And then promoted to 9th grade, I guess during the summer activity. The 7th grade students.
Okay, when you say the mass promotion in MSIS,
In our school package.
okay, I got you. After the closeout in month 9,
Yes.
everything. Then they were going to 7th, and y'all went in 7th to 8th after they closed out the year, and then month 10, month 10.
What changed this year is that you did promote them during the period of the school year still being open, which is what flagged it for MDE, it sounds like.
A month. And we were trying to streamline their transition to the high school to where they would go ahead and be with that 9th grade cohort and they would not be flagged. We wanted them to a more seamless transition to the high school. I would also like to speak to the inception of the Star Academy. It was a grant 6 years ago that Gene Massey, who was with the Department of Education for many years, was involved with. So this is not something that we just dreamed up. You know, it was a grant, and Dr. Massey worked with the legislature for this grant.
If the 7th graders were promoted to 8th grade at the end of the year, and then could they take the 8th grade assessment during the summer to make it legitimate? It can only be during that April.
I guess my concern, again, and I am in the Office of Secondary Education, and again, I applaud any type of accelerated program trying to get students to graduation. I don't refute that. However, I would say that if you are going to assess a student's potential and their readiness for 9th grade, then they should sit for 8th grade assessments to determine that readiness. So you've got students that are sitting for 7th grade assessments. Their readiness, I guess, is determined by grades that are assigned in the program. They never take the 8th grade assessments in ELA mathematics or a science assessment that, again, they have not taken since the 5th grade, yet when they go to high school, they'll have to pass the Biology 1 test in order to get a diploma. I'm talking about what's in the best interest of students. You know, it is better for students that if they're going to be in an accelerated program, that if you're going to make the determination to exit them out of that program and get them to the 9th grade with their peers, and you're going to give them 2 years of instruction in 1 year, and you're talking about students that are already 2 to 3 years behind, that it is in the best interest of the students to do this in a manner where they take the 7th grade compacted in the beginning and do that by Christmas. Then they're in the 8th grade second semester, therefore they would sit for the 8th grade assessments. That's just what is good for kids.
Documented anywhere as a requirement?
No.
All right, let me ask you this. If they did that and changed them at semester to 8th grade in MSIS, would they count not tested in 7th grade? And would we have that issue again since they were?
I don't know.
Way to test
I don't
2
know.
grades
I'm
in
just,
1 year.
again,
Right.
understand.
You
I'm
see
just
what I'm
speaking
saying?
from a programmatic, what I think is best interest of kids as far as promotion and getting them prepared to not only be with their peers, but be successful with their peers. As far as
That's
the
really my
accountability.
concern. That's my concern with all of these issues this morning. You use the words, Ms. Clemens, like, we encourage and in the best interest and so forth, and that's fine. But I guess I'm concerned with school districts trying to anticipate preferences of policies that aren't documented, just like the in count being a practice and yet not a written or stated policy. I think that these examples this morning inform adjustments that need to be made to the documentation going forward. You know, a good opportunity to clean up a lot of this lack of clarity. But it just seems like we're penalizing these school districts that are taking bold moves on behalf of students to, you know, apply past practices rather than written policy to the situations. And I also I understand also where Alan was coming from in terms of concerns with gaming the system. But I suspect every school district is gonna, you know, it's in their best interest to try to use wiggle room wherever there is wiggle room to improve their numbers. That's part of the flaw of an accountability system that slaps a, you know, a shorthand letter grade on these scores. You know, but
I'd like to say that I do feel like MDE has taken a position with the statewide middle school initiative to try to do something for overage students. So these are issues that are gonna have to be addressed. And I again feel like because we're taking a bold move, we're being punished for that. And that is just as a principal in a school with 600 students every day, that is just my opinion.
Have your, this is off the cuff, but the success rate of the students?
I absolutely do. It's in your
Not in
PowerPoint.
there. On the subject area test. It was in there, the distribution.
Because for extracurricular.
Right.
Help me understand that.
Absolutely. So, students who are involved in extracurricular activities, that's one more set of eyes that are on them. They are more engaged in the school. There is lots of studies to support that.
How would moving them to 8th grade stop them from
No,
doing
no,
it?
not 8th grade. The program is a 7th and 8th grade program, mostly 8th grade students. The 7th grade program are the students who are in dire need of help. They're 2 to 3 years behind, and they need the schools to intervene and do something on their behalf. The 8th grade students, the 7th grade students would not be too old. However, if it wasn't,
they're 2 years behind. The age 15 for participation gets them.
that's right. So, but it would affect the 8th grade students in the program, and we were trying to have integrity throughout the program, do the same thing in the same grades. And it is, again, the way it was done in the beginning when the program was set up. It is the way we have continued to do it. As MDE has demonstrated to you, sometimes that's the practice that was done. It was a practice that we continue to do. We were not aware that this issue was going to happen, so.
I was just curious. I mean, just if they were able to participate in something as a 7th grader, how they would be stopped if they were categorized as.
Well, actually, the 7th graders are too old to participate, period. And because we put them in the STAR program, it allows them to participate in the 8th grade, right?
And also for at-risk students that are really struggling like this, any incentive for them to be part of the school community and such as athletics and stuff helps them want to come to school instead of not coming, dropping out, becoming a statistic. So allowing them to take part in that is a vital part in motivating them in the area of staying in school.
I get that completely, but that's age related, not necessarily year related. About what year how old you are by a certain date, when you participate with what grade level.
Well, if we classify the 8th graders as 9th graders, in December, then they cannot participate in spring sports at the middle school.
I was talking about 7th grade.
Right, and that's what I was saying. We
And I
just
don't know
did this.
how.
We had the same practice for the 7th graders and the 8th graders in the program. It was just one consolidated practice, so we didn't do two separate things. Yes, ma'am, they are. They have an athletic period, some of them do, and a band period.
They're doing two grades in 1 year with extracurriculars too.
Some of them are, yes. Mhm. Mhm. That, in our waiver from the Innovative Network covers that seat time. It's actually listed in our waiver.
I'm not worried about the seat time, I'm worried about being able to, that's the pre-listed structure.
And again,
Having
We were trying to have integrity throughout the program, so we were doing the same things for the 7th and the 8th grade students.
Can I
Well,
respond briefly to Ms. Barfield's?
That's up to the
statement?
commission. Remember, this is time for the commission members to ask questions
Yeah, we
right
kind of
now.
we kind of got out of hand where there's back and forth between the two parties. And really it should be the one party that's being asked the question that is allowed to, unless I'm wrong. Am I correct in that? Nobody should be speaking unless they're being directed to in this question and answer, unless they're being directed by the commission.
Absolutely.
It shouldn't be back and forth between the two parties.
Absolutely. So again, I mean, commission members, this is your show. You ask what you want to ask. And we do ask whoever you call, please come up to the microphone so that we can be heard.
Yes, there was just a comment about a lack of documentation of the business rules regarding some issues. And I just wanted to point out that 18.3 refers to what happens when a student is not assessed on the appropriate grade level. It says that if a student's MSIS grade level or peer level for ungraded student does not match his or her assessment grade level, the student's scores will not be included in the numerator for participation, growth, or proficiency calculations, and the student will not count as proficient, not meeting growth, and not tested. Likewise, the student scores will not be used the following year in growth calculations. And it is the position of the agency that that this applies for these students as they should have been assessed.
But in previous years, they were counted.
They were counted because the school did not change the grade assignment of the student.
Finished in the 8th grade. They finished the year in 8th grade.
They
and
should
took
have-
a 7th grade test.
All right, that's the position of
They
the
coded
agency.
them as 8th grade in the last month, and they took a 7th grade test.
And because they changed the date of when they moved the students, promoted the students, is the
Way it
first
was
time
flagged.
in the 6 years.
That was the only way it was flagged, and they knew it.
That's our position, that these students should have been tested in the 8th grade. Should have been tested. If the same thing occurred last year, they should have been taking the 8th grade assessment. However, we had no way of knowing that occurred.
Obviously, a special program that was put together a number of years ago for this school, or a few schools maybe. I don't know if they were the only school that were granted this.
It's a rare example where the grade at the time of the test is not the same as the grade at the end of the year, basically.
Devil's in the details on exactly how and when the date ran.
It appears to be happening here. They're 7th graders when they take the test, but they're 8th graders at the end of the year.
And up until this past year, they had never changed them in MSIS until after the end of the year. So therefore, a flag was never thrown up, and the department had no idea that they were in 8th grade. The MSIS said 7th. They got a 7th grade assessment. They're good to go. And when a computer is calculating, remember, a computer's only looking at numbers. They don't know that, and so it didn't throw an error. No, they switched to 8th grade second semester curriculum.
In order to complete their units.
And is this the only program like this in the state?
Women?
I know that there are other school districts that have programs, they call them various programs, where they try to accelerate students. But like I said, in most cases, they're doing 4x4 blocks. They may have like a modified block schedule, but then they do a block within a block and do a modified block schedule to see if students, because not every student who enters these programs are going to be able to show proficiency in 2 years of instruction in a single year. Again, you're talking about students who probably are challenged anyway and struggle in school. So you identify those kids as early as 5th grade who have the potential to do that, And then they create a block within a block where a student might perform seventh grade curriculum during the first semester in a 4x4 block situation, and then they do eighth grade their second semester if they show an ability to accelerate at the pace they need to.
Two separate questions. So if these 16 student scores were taken out or were appropriately counted in the seventh grade, would that then put them over the 95% threshold?
I have not calculated that specifically, but I would think yes, it would. This would be a sufficient count of students to put them over 95%.
Second question. You mentioned that the other high school in question was not the only high school that consolidated this past year.
That's correct.
Has this issue affected anyone else? Did they all get new codes? Do you know that off the top of your head?
I know of one other district that I have spoken with who consolidated their high schools and had the same question about how grad rates are assigned, and I told them the same thing, addressed the two policies where it's stated how we do this. So that's how I know. There may be others. I do not know if their letter grade was affected. I just know that I spoke with them on the phone and they asked me. It was the same situation. Two high schools were consolidated.
And the issue with this one, as far as Benton County, is they're so close to that transition, that cut point, to where those 3 points, which is 6 actually in the model, would push them over that threshold.
Item 9, commission members, you have heard from each superintendent and from MDE. Today, the commission must determine whether to uphold the internal review committee's decision to deny the district's appeal of the final accountability results for 2018-2019 and assign the districts an official grade in accordance with state and federal law. We will consider each district separately. So, North Bolivar. Do I have a motion concerning North Bolivar? Accept the internal review committee, or again, deny it would be the correct verb then.
They didn't have the
Paula said that when it initially came to them, it was take the higher score. Now the new information that was brought with the PowerPoint presentation said
that I believe is different. Before the final accountability results were presented to the board back in September, the district had an opportunity to appeal the preliminary results. Is that correct? And the preliminary results is when they requested the higher of the two. So then it went to the final accountability results, which the board approved. They are appealing that decision, and what the appeal to the internal review committee was the request to take the district. Is that correct? Okay. So when it went
school.
Yeah. Final results, when they appealed it to the internal review committee after the final results, their request on appeal was to take the district graduation grade. So there was a difference.
Average.
So in this is an example of when we're cleaning up these policies. One of the clarification points in policy 3.0 has been presented, which you approved to take to the board for APA, is that you cannot contest the final accountability results. You cannot appeal if you have not made the same exact request in the preliminary results. So their appeal would need to be the same moving forward next year.
change grades or cut scores because we were in a transition from test to test to be fair to the districts. So I just believe we have made those decisions when there are districts or schools in transition or doing things for 1 year till they know, till things are straightened out the next year. So,
I also had a question about procedure. Is it appropriate to ask an executive session?
Or you can do that as well.
There's no motion on the table, so I mean, I would say we could break for lunch. Thir- Yeah, 30 minutes. Okay, so we will break for lunch for 30 minutes and reconvene. Well, welcome back, everyone. Commission members, we are still on item number 9. Consideration of appeals of the final accountability results under policy 3.1.4 of the Mississippi Public Schools Accountability Standards 2019. So we are to determine whether to uphold the internal review committee's decision to deny the district's appeal of the final accountability results for 2018-2019. We'll consider both. So
I'd like to make a motion on North Bolivar.
Okay.
Uphold the internal reviews committee based on business rule 20.1 of the accountability standards, that they followed the standards, and uphold the internal review committee's decision on North Bolivar.
have a motion by Mr. Gill to uphold the internal review committee's decision. Do I have a second?
Mike Lindsay, second.
Discussion.
I had evidence of review that there was a request made for the, out that in front of me. No, I don't have any further discussion.
Okay, so all in favor?
Aye.
Oppose? Okay, the motion carries. Okay, we will now take into consideration George County School District.
Can we split those as Bendale's and the middle school, or do we have to do them all in one?
Alan, sorry, Mr. Burke.
Explain how, I mean, my understanding is that they had 20 different items that they included as part of, because at some point you said 17 of 20 as part of their appeal. So where there's two separate letters. There's one that's coming from the elementary school and there's one from the middle school. So the question has been raised. The IRC denied the appeal in its totality.
IRC viewed it as one appeal. Certainly the issue is participation rates for their schools. They have students that were both invalidated and students that didn't test. That's consistent across the two schools. That's the way the internal review committee looked at it.
One other question, just for clarification, just on numbers, I think is what I heard Mr. Burrow say. We had discussion about the 16 students that were in the STAR program, the 5 that withdrew and went to homeschool. And I was asking them about the number of students that were enrolled in school that just didn't take the test because they weren't there, whatever the case may be. Did you have a number for that? Did you say 16? So outside of these 21 students, there's 16 students that were enrolled in the school that just didn't test during that 3-week window. Is that an accurate statement?
So what I did was look at students enrolled in month 8 for that school that did not have an assessment score. And so those would be the students that did not test. So it would not include any that were invalidated. It would just be students that didn't have a assessment score.
Students that were enrolled that did not have a score.
Right. That's what I searched for. I got 16.
That's outside of the 16 STAR and the 5 withdrawn. That's extra.
That would be the ones in the STAR program that were invalidated. Those that withdrew before the testing window would not have a score, so those could have been included in that 16. I think they had 3 in school 14 that they appealed that withdrew before the testing.
Right, 3 and 2 is 5. But outside of those, I guess my question is, were there students that were just absent that they didn't test that would have helped them get their participation outside of these?
Yes.
You understand?
Yes, I think there would be 13 then Yeah.
13
At
students.
least 13 that did not assess in all required areas.
That were there during the 3-week window, that weren't part of this.
Right.
Right.
Entertain a motion concerning George County School Board.
Wanted confirmation of how they treated it, but it would be the commission's pleasure, as those are distinct. They each receive a school grade as well as the district grade.
Because I see it as two different scenarios.
I just wanted confirmation of how they treated that appeal, when they looked at it. It's the commission's pleasure on how they handled the appeal and the decision.
I recommend to uphold the internal review committee on Bendale Elementary School only.
Yeah, we can clarify that.
The downgrading of the letter grade of Bendale Elementary due to lack of participation on that school, I recommend to uphold the internal review committee's decision to deny the appeal.
Had a motion by Mr. Gill for Bendale Elementary. Second by Mr. Brewer. Is there any discussion?
How would that affect district? I mean, because it all goes into a district score. Is that even possible to?
District participation rate is calculated at the district aggregate. So we're talking about much larger denominator. Even if we were to pull out just a few students based on these schools, it probably would not affect the
district wasn't downgraded in this case. It was the 2 individual schools.
two
Okay,
individual schools. Yes.
All right, we have a motion and a second. I'm seeing some looks, so if there's some discussion, let's have it.
The Bendale Elementary, yes. The
Bendale only.
they had the students to withdraw in April before the testing window to homeschool. 3, I think.
Discussion? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the motion carries. All right, now for the middle school. George County Middle School.
Follow the line of thinking that program that was granted 6 years ago and has been ongoing, even though it was done a day or so apart, does seem to be a matter of a day and looking at numbers versus the program as a whole. It is also troubling that 13 students didn't test, because we have 1,300 students, and I don't know that I had a handful that didn't test through the whole window. So there is a little concern there, but I do follow your line of thinking on the other.
Well, I mean, what we've seen, to me, and even there's not a motion on the table, but something that's been consistent throughout the day is we're talking about the difference between how somebody was coded as to what graduation rate is used, even though a school is trying to do dynamic things to not only save taxpayers money, but more importantly, to try to help a school system to help children, and they're penalized, even though the rule is there. And I voted to uphold the appeal. I mean the lower decision. But it's troubling that there's just this consistent. Are we being punitive, or are we being helping towards schools in the state? And when somebody shows evidence of trying to do better, it gets very murky with semantics over this code versus this code, or we put these kids in 8th grade in the 8th month or the 9th month or the 10th month. And as a commissioner, and even an educator, but as a commissioner, I find it very difficult to deal with. We're going to change the grade of an entire school district over somebody coding something literally a few days or a few weeks from when it should be, and that changes dramatically how somebody is perceived statewide or locally, because that drives the economy, that drives people coming in for economic development. And so if we're going to make these rules of placing these labels on schools, A, B, C, D, F, or numerically, and we're getting down to whether or not somebody pushed a button in April or pushed a button in May, to me it's very disheartening as a taxpayer, because I support students first. I'm not on either side other than I'm on a student side, and it's not just at my school. We're here to represent all schools, all students in the state. It's just troubling to me to be in a position that we're having to make this decision over pushing a button and coding somebody this way, or putting somebody on a list the next month, and that distinguishes this huge difference in a number, whether you're a D or an F or whatever. Yes, and I'm saying on both of these situations, to me, it's we're here tasked to follow what policy is. We've gone over this for years. We follow policy, and so you follow the policy, but then you look at the story. We always tell our kids that you're an individual, you're unique, and your story is different from other people's stories, and we're putting all these people in this one big box of numbers to grade you out in a box. But if you look at the totality of the stories, it's hard to sit back and look at somebody lose an accreditation number or letter and be downgraded, which dramatically affects a city or a county, because of an instance of, let's put these kids in this grade in April instead of May or whatever. It's disheartening, because we should be a state that champions efforts to get better. And so I know that's, there's the math people that want to go by the policy, and then there's the heart that says, how can we penalize somebody for, how can you not be on their team for trying to get, because I know what it's like from being a teacher, of having a list of names of 14-year-olds in the 7th grade from an administrator saying, this is 14 years and 8 months, and this is 14 years and 3 months, and if we don't get them passed on somehow, they're going to be ineligible for sports, and that's the only thing that's keeping them in the game, into school. So these things it's just disheartening to see all of these things being put in a box when there's a bigger story out there. There's a much bigger story going on for these children. So yeah, that's my 2 cents that y'all can just throw in the garbage if you want to.
I just want to remind the commission, as far as consistency goes, you do have business rules that have been vetted by multiple stakeholders, by the commission, by the board. They've gone out for APA. They are approved. In comparison to last year's appeals, it was a very, very small population where a business rule existed that no longer exists. And it was only 2 schools that it affected, those 2 special schools. There is a business rule in this instance and in the other instances that we've heard on today, and it applies to all of the districts throughout the state, all of the schools throughout the state. So just keep that in mind as far as how the commission is looking at that, what they've approved in the past, and what exists currently.
Well, that's true, but there are also legislatures can make an exception Potentially, if you don't do it exactly right.
Not, they did not take it up in the legislature. The commission came back and, I mean, I think it was a combined effort where,
I was talking about that 6 years ago, the trying
Oh,
to catch
okay,
students
yeah.
up in a very specialized program. That was.
Motion, we still have to make a decision on the middle school.
I guess I would make the motion that you grant the appeal on the 16 students in that special program, and whatever impact that has, that has.
Moving forward, yeah.
Directed on exactly how that should go. More direction for that program. Students probably should be moved from 7th grade to 8th grade at Christmas and tested appropriately. Local board policy ought to be written to address that, and this should never come up again.
Middle school also had 3 students, so you're making a motion. Right, you're making a motion specific to the STAR program.
That is correct. I second.
So I'll make sure I'm understanding. Your motion is to grant the appeal, which means overturn the decision of the internal review committee regarding the students at George County Middle School that are in question, that are in the STAR program. And have the district do what?
By saying that, can I ask a question to this motion? By saying that, you're saying that the 16 students should be re-entered as valid and not invalid. Therefore, the percentage of participation would be above the 95%. That would be the result of that, correct? Yeah, yeah.
For those 16 students.
Sean made a motion, did you didn't have, did you have a second?
I had a second, Mistel was second.
So Alan and I just have a concern or a clarification. I mean, we can't validate those students' tests because they didn't test on the grade level. We have evidence in MSIS that those students were taking 8th grade courses, but they took the know that the students did not test on the appropriate grade level because we already had the opportunity for the I thought we did. I mean, we certainly did. I'm just trying to see if we did all the procedures here. I'm not sure we are.
Again, let's let the commission members lead this discussion, you know. Have a motion on the table.
Well, your immediate, Sean, getting back to your immediate motion, you made a motion and said whatever follows, follows. That's what you said. Correct.
And I'm taking into account that this program was approved, that maybe Ms. Massey did help coordinate this, that the legislature found funds for it. It has been done 5 years in a row, and it was done a day or two beforehand on clicking a button versus was before. If that's not the case, if that's not true, if there is not a special program that was afforded that, then this would be a moot conversation or motion. So I'm assuming that part is true.
That question came up from the school that this was a 6-year program, and it was not, I mean, it was also corroborated by MDE that this program has been, that they did know that it had been going on. What MDE said was it did not come up that this was it didn't come up to MDE that this was their internal procedure because it wasn't flagged because of changing the date of moving those kids from one grade to the next. And this was the first year in the 6th that it happened. But yeah, it's a rock and a hard place. The motion has not been withdrawn, and the second.
It is not.
And the second is not withdrawn. Yeah, the second has not been withdrawn.
Test a student takes is based on the grade that they're classified in, not the grade of the coursework they're taking.
Right. And that's
Right?
the
Test, they're classified as 7th graders, so they took a 7th grade test. Even though they may be taking 8th grade classes, course material, they're classified as 7th graders. That's right?
And see, they took the test and they were still coded the day they took the test as a 7th grader. I'm assuming this from what I've heard. And then when they started validating at the end of the year, they had already switched them to 8th grade. So in MSIS, when they use that time and space of checking the assessment versus the grade, it didn't match. So therefore, it threw them out when it doesn't match. Your grade assignment in MSIS, when it doesn't match the assessment, that's when it kicks them out, because they had already been in MSIS promoted to 8th grade.
Can I ask a question? So they took the 7th grade assessment, but it was invalidated. So that means their score didn't go into growth, any of that.
Proficiency or
Like, it's
anything.
just nothing.
It was invalid.
Gotcha. All right.
Motion passes, are those scores gonna be put back into accountability?
That's where I was going.
Your recommendation goes
Yeah.
on to the state
This is
board.
not the final say anyway, so it has to go to the board. You know, they can overturn us like we overturn the internal review. If that in fact happens.
Back to policy, the test that a student should be taking should be consistent with the grade that they're going to be in the validation report, not the grade that they are when they take the test. That's what I'm
The biggest
understanding.
issue here is you had a cutout of a small subset of students. And evidently the direction and detail of exactly how that's supposed to roll out either wasn't done well enough or wasn't followed well enough. In this case. Or either there was no program at all and all that's been inaccurate.
Are there documented policies for some of these questions? Just, the accurate test shall be this grade of the student on such and such a date, or the end, or
that's
the end
business
score
rule
shall be.
18.3, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Test scores are invalidated. And so 18.3 specifically says if the student's MSIS grade level or peer grade level for ungraded does not match his or her assessment grade level, the student's score will not be included in the grade of participation, growth, or proficiency calculation.
It does not say whether that's at the time of the test or the time of validation, which is the issue here.
Likewise, this scores will not be the following year for the calculation. I can't speak about it. My understanding of what's been presented is they were coded as seventh grade, they took the seventh grade test, and then when everything is validated, they had switched in MSIS to eighth grade, therefore their seventh and eighth grade didn't match. If that's the simplified version of it.
Lack of clarity because of this, the uniqueness of this situation.
Yeah, and I'm not saying anybody's at fault on this. This is not pitting one against the other, in my opinion. It's just a conundrum has been put before us, and it's not the first time this has happened. We're dealing with, circumstances that every single school doesn't there are different programs and everybody's not operating on the same thing, and so this is a specific thing. And I understand the fact that if it is judged by the state school board that there is a policy that backs up the decision by the internal review, and we overturn that, then in their eyes we would be going against a policy of which this board actually recommended to be created. I understand that, but at some point there arrives some things that need to be changed, and according to your comments just then, looking forward to, hey, let's be more specific on this. Well, while we're looking forward to try to change something or possibly make something a little bit more clear, why would we penalize the person that's involved with it at the present moment? It's to me, it's very disheartening to see this situation. Board policy or not board policy, to have a specific situation like this occur. Because I know for most, if not all communities, that difference between grading scales is incredibly significant. As we saw last year with the emergency about the school on the coast that got given an F when we did not consider the fact that school was a entity unlike any other entity. So this is a program unlike other programs.
We'll have a motion and a second on the table. Is there any other discussion? For clarity, do you mind reading that to us again, just to make sure?
All right. Motion by Mr. Burr, seconded by Mr.
On that piece, are we overstepping our bounds as a commission by even that second part of that? I mean, is that our charge, or is it our charge to uphold?
Just go uphold or deny.
That's really. Would you amend to say that?
I'll amend to delete that.
And I'll amend. I will second his amendment.
All in favor?
Aye.
Oppose? Okay, motion carries.
All right, but you still have not addressed the remaining decision of the IRC.
The three students at the middle school. Yeah.
Okay.
Can you just amend to, without mention of?
You've already made your vote. Rather than rescind that motion, I would just, to make it clean, deal with the other.
So uphold.
Move to uphold the decision of the internal review committee related to the three students who were at the middle school but withdrew before the test.
Is that an official motion? And a second by Dr. Martin. Ms. Barfield, Ms. Martin.
uphold the decision of the appellate committee, and deny the appeal of the remaining three students.
Okay. Is there any discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Oppose? Okay, the motion carries. All right, item 10, other business. I know Dr. Malone has a couple things.
Yeah.
Other business? All right, item 11. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
By Mr. Mistelis. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Gill. Do I have a second? Second by Dr. Martin. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Adjourned at 1:29.